Hey guys, welcome back. On this episode I am doing a brake upgrade on E46 M3 but not using F80 setup. So this is slightly different and it's quite common among the E46 M3, or it used to be before the F80 became readily available. But it's the E90 M Performance calipers, which are the same as the calipers found on 135i E8x, so E82 and E81 I think, or E87, whatever it is, so the 135i of the E chassis. And the front is fairly straightforward. You get the calipers and you'll need a set of brackets. I tend to use Epitech brackets and recommend them. They're very good. And CSL discs, 348mm I think they are. Perfect fit, set of pads, everything good, nothing really to complain about. Custom set of hoses just to make them slightly longer, and use E46 unions because E90 unions, because E46 unions are too long and then they stretch the hose. So you want to use E90 unions. If you want a set of these hoses, give me a shout. I've got them available in my store. And the back is somewhat different or difficult. So let's move on to the back. So the rear setup then. What are the options? A lot of people can retain the existing E46 M3 rear brake disc, which I think is 325mm or 330mm, something like that, with 22mm thickness, and they fit these calipers. The only trouble with that is they bolt straight on, but the caliper sits ever so slightly out of alignment. It sits higher up by about that much. So once you bolt it, you have unswept area down the bottom here, and equally you have unswept area of the pad at the top here. So essentially the pad, instead of sitting perfectly aligned this way, it sits higher up like that. So you are losing that much of pad contact. So that's a bit of an issue. You could do it that way if you're not bothered, but there is a better way. So when you bolt the caliper onto the rear trailing arm on the E46 M3, it's aligned perfectly for a disc diameter of 345mm. So you can get a 345mm, and you can either get the E60 disc, which is what we've got here, or the F-series discs. So F-series discs are slightly deeper, so they have essentially a higher offset, so they're no good for this application. So we've opted to use the E60 disc. So E60 disc, there's two ways of doing it. E60 disc is 345mm by 24mm, so ever so slightly thicker. So you're pretty much on the limit of how much the caliper can take in terms of disc thickness. And the contact area, the swept surface, is actually bigger than this of the pad. However, the pad aligns perfectly with the top of the disc. So you are still having a little bit of unswept area, but that's due to the fact that the E60 disc has a larger contact area than the E46 M3. So you're still getting full pad engagement, but you're having a little bit of unswept area. So this is the right way of doing it, because you know the entire pad is engaged with as much of the disc as possible. I did have an idea to use F-series pads, because F-series pads are you've got slightly bigger depth this way, so they would match this swept area perfectly, but they're narrower, so sadly we can't use them. Here is an example. So F-series pad and the E-series pad. No bueno. Now, as for fitting the disc onto the trailing arm, there are two ways of doing it. Way number one is remove majority of the backing plate, so literally everything up to the handbrake shoes, completely cut it off, and install the disc straight onto the hub spigot. So because this here will interfere with the dust shield, so you'd have to cut the dust shield just below this line here, literally completely lose the dust shield. And then you can bolt this on, and the caliper would only need 1mm of spacing between the caliper, so just behind the tabs there, between the caliper and the trailing arm. So what I've decided to do, because I like the idea of keeping things fairly OEM and retaining the backing plates, the dust shields, I have decided to space the discs by 5mm using my spacer kit and the spigot ring. and then use a 6mm spacer for the caliper tabs, which aligns the caliper absolutely perfectly across the disc. And there isn't much of a room for a margin of error, because, as I said earlier, the caliper is designed for 22mm thick discs. So when you're using 24mm thick discs, it's on the limit of what the caliper can take, and often it will not clear here. So sometimes you may need to actually shave a little bit of these caliper tabs here, which isn't the case in our case, because 5mm and 6mm fit perfectly. So just the thing to bear in mind, you have to make sure that the hub spigot is perfectly clean, wire brushed, nice and shiny, and you have to make sure that the spigot for the wheel and the disc is also perfectly clean, so you can install the spigot ring nicely and so that the disc goes over it without any issues. Now, the owner of the car that I'm working on today has given it to his mechanic, who I think wasn't very impressed and didn't really want to do the job, in my opinion, and he's attempted to fit the kit. He's completely destroyed the spigot ring, and this is the condition that the spacers come back in. So not ideal, but yeah, in my opinion, I think if you don't want to do the job, or you don't have the patience to do it properly, it's best to leave it to someone who can do it and who will have the patience to do so. And finally, the lines are custom with 90-degree bends. They are slightly extended, custom E46 lines, which are available from me directly and from my online store, extended by 50mm with 90-degree unions. And that's what would work with these calipers as well as the F-Series calipers. So E60 discs, they have a different bolting pattern for the retaining screws. So they only have one, and it doesn't line up with either of the two that the E46 M3 hub has. So what I've done in this case, I've actually bolted down the disc just so it's nice and flush on the hub, just to make sure that my alignment is all okay. So if you have a look here, see, not a lot of gap there and not a lot of gap there, but the disc is centered. It's centered and there's no contact, which is absolutely the main thing here. And as for spacing, that's where it is. So 6mm spacer between the caliper and the hub, and 5mm spacer between the disc and the hub. And this is what you end up with. Once everything is fitted and you haven't butchered the spigot ring and your hub was clean, this is what the installation should look like. So you've got the spacer just under there inside, right? You've got the spigot ring nicely centering the disc on the wheel spigot, and you still have a reasonable spigot left for the wheel to centralize on, or for the spacer, which the owner of this car currently has. So spacer, and it centralizes perfectly. We are also offering hub extenders, 3D printed ones, in case you are running into issues where your wheel is not centralizing and you need a little bit more real estate on this end. We're also offering that. They should be available in the store soon, so check it out. If they're not available at the time of you watching this, drop us a message and we can work something out. And for the final point, just to show you how much of the backing plate you need to trim. So you need to trim just a little bit here and a little bit here in order to accommodate the caliper. And you also need to trim this little piece here. So that's how much you've got to take off, and that's where that's come from. So really not that much, but it's quite important to take this piece off in order for caliper to be able to clear, and in order for there to be enough space to fit the little 6mm spacers. So that's it. You retain majority of the heat shield or the dust shield or the backing plate, and everything fits perfectly, everything works, everything aligns. The only downside is that you don't have a retaining screw, which could make the installation a little bit tricky. So the best way is to just bolt it down with, if you have some caliper bolts, just to bolt it down so it's nicely aligned while you're working on it. Adjust the handbrake, make sure everything is a-okay, then take the bolts out, put the wheel on, and then the torque and the clamp load between the wheel and the hub will keep everything nicely aligned and everything nice and straight. And this is the final result. Everything fitted, torqued, the system's bled, handbrakes adjusted, nothing's interfering with anything, retained 90% of the dust shield. As you can see it there, still works perfectly fine with 345mm disc. Plenty of clearance for the spokes, plenty of clearance for the wheels. They will work with 18-inch wheels. So there you go. One thing to bear in mind is obviously spacing out the disc will in turn space out the wheel. So if you are running aggressive setup already, you might run into arch clearance issues, but plus minus 5mm is, you should really allow for that anyway. But yeah, just bear that in mind. And obviously, if your bolts are on the limit of what they should be in terms of length, you need to add 5mm to the bolt length. So there you go, all done, all finished. Such a gorgeous color this is. Ruby red metallic individual E46 M3 color. Just beautiful, especially now that the sun's out. I'm sure this roof is going to come down when the owner picks it up and take it for a nice wonderful blast. The brakes feel fantastic. There's no increase in pedal travel, and the bite is there straight away, and it's only going to improve as the discs bed in. So there's that little bit of unswept area towards the center, but other than that, it's all done. And the main purpose of this is really if you are running classic wheels, and if you're running stuff like BBS RS2s or things like AC Schnitzer, generally people tend to run 18-inch wheels, and using F80 setup will not allow you to use those classic wheels on classic cars such as this one. So this setup is something that will give you quite a lot of clearance to the spokes, and it's going to give you quite a lot of clearance to the barrel. So it's a 348 setup versus 380, which is on the F-Series. So if you are running classic setup, maybe something like Racing Dynamics or something like that in 18s, and you want to upgrade your brakes, but F80 is too big for what you've got and you don't want to change your wheels, this is the one to go for. If I've missed anything out, do give me a shout in the comments or just message me directly. I'm more than happy to answer all your questions and work with you to try and help you out to do something similar if that's your intention. So thanks again, guys. Thanks for watching. And hopefully somebody finds this useful. And if you do, drop me a like and perhaps comment. So yeah, thanks again. And I'll see you again in the next one.